I'd like to tell about the Ransom Pace, who was such a wonderful person. He was my grandfather, and I remember him as a child taking me by the hand and walking with me through, we called it the Old Piney Grove, which was, then he had about 500 acres on the other side of that, and many, many acres.
Now this was near the Pace house?
Right, the Pace house was built on that property.
And that's where all the piney grove?
He, I guess it was his father or grandfather, settled there, and the original part of that house, we were always told, was a log house. And I had visions of a cabin, but later on I found it was different. And then it was a log house, and then my grandfather and his wife, of course, drovers would come up the Indian Trail and stop at this house with their cattle or pigs or whatever they were driving and spend the night at this place.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would go on. So, and it kept getting so popular till my grandfather, I don't know what, I'm not good at dates, they enlarged it, but I have pictures of it. It was to this huge inn.
Mm-hmm.
It was called the Pace House.
And that ended up being a boarding house for the summer people.
It was an inn, and it had this long front porch with rockers. And of course they had, at first they didn't have any running water in it because they had washstands and basins.
Mm-hmm.
Servants that took care of this would come up from South Carolina, because it was so much cooler, and they would find work in Saluda, in the mountains. And so my grandmother had 5 servant houses.
5 servant houses on that property?
Yes, ma'am. In the back of the house, there were 5 houses. We called them servant houses. They were very, very primitive, but they had a roof and a bed, and these people would come up and work for my grandma. This was a huge inn, and there were 5 of those houses, and these people would stay there, and there's one in particular that I remember was a butler, and I have a picture of him, but I remember him in his white coat going around the dining room, huge dining room that had the white linen cloths on the table, and the goblets with the napkins folded in such a way, stuck in the goblets. I remember the man's name was William Kilgo. I don't know why I remember.
William Kilgo?
Kilgo, that was his name.
And that cabinet over there was behind him in that picture, wasn't it?
Yes. And I just want to tell about that. And so it stayed there a long time, and over a period of years, of course, times got hard, and I had an uncle, which I will not mention his name, but he was the baby in the family. And he and his wife, who they were living way beyond their means, would constantly come to my grandmother and say he was in debt. He worked for the railroad, and he had to have some money. And so she would parcel off some land to him, and she kept on doing that, and there was a mortgage on this house, and because of him, the house, the Pace house, was sold for debt. None of the rest of them could pay for it. So I stayed there for a while, and then, but I'll tell this, that as a child, when I'd go down to there was a certain room that my grandmother always stayed in, and everybody said, now the log cabin is right above this room, so I had a vision of this house, little one-room cabin that they first started in. But when they tore the Pace house down, lo and behold, they found a 2-story, lovely log structure there with a staircase and everything.
With the staircase? Had the staircase been
staircase
hidden?
From the outside.
Had it been hidden in the...
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, they had to get up to the outside because it was 2 stories. And, of course, they relentlessly tore down the house, and they took down trees that had been brought over from England and built this
nursing home.